Number 10. Tony Stark. Yet another time where Tony has gone off the rails a little bit, this time taking place in the Axis event, in which the morality of Earth's heroes and villains were reversed by magic. While the spell was undone, the now corrupt Tony managed to shield himself and thus retained his evil personality, even though most of Earth's heroes reverted back to their usual selves. With his still vast intellect and suave personality, this darker Tony was able to infiltrate society and build an empire for himself, growing into an egotistical monster, releasing the Extremis 3.0 virus to the public as an app, addicting people to the substance and then depriving them of any further upgrades until they paid his fee of $100 per day. This caused a ton of suffering as a large portion of society basically became addicts and were enslaved to Tony's will. Now, like I said though, this Tony retained his intelligence. He knew exactly what he had to do to balance his cruelty in order to prevent the world from rising up against him. So he engaged in hostile takeovers of many companies, forcing them to promote his extremist apps through blackmail, and even went as far as unleashing an army of advanced drones to act as personal police force. By every definition of the word, he just became a tyrant. Number 9. Ant-Man. During Marvel's Secret Empire event, you know, the one where Captain America revealed himself to be the supreme leader of Hydra, Ant-Man, like many of the other heroes, naturally sided with the hero side of things and was a dedicated member of the Underground. That is, until his daughter Cassie was abducted by Hydra and he was forced to not only comply with their every demand, but also report to them all the plans of the Underground resistance. While many of the plans he relayed weren't too major, he was forced to tell Hydra when the heroes managed to find 2 fragments of the Cosmic Cube, and that resulted in Hydra showing up at the Underground's doorstep. I will say though, to his merit, he did confess that he was involved with Hydra and tried to make amends for doing wrong by the team. And he also played a huge role in restoring Steve Rogers when the Cosmic Cube reformed. Now, if you've got the time, this storyline definitely deserves a read, starting with 2017's Secret Empire Volume 1, Number 0. Number 8. Avenger X. When the Avengers initially sought out to track down the Stranger alongside the X-Men, Professor X used Cerebro to locate and rescue Cressida from the cosmic being, and upon first glance, she seemed like the perfect weapon. Her powers augmented the strength and abilities of her teammates, allowing them to take on groups of supervillains with ease. As she was explaining what she was capable of, Scarlet Witch cut her off and just offered her a spot on the team, which honestly made sense because who wouldn't want someone like that on their team? But what they didn't realize is that there was actually a huge cost that comes along with her powers. In order to empower anybody and increase their abilities, she has to drain the lives of everyone and everything around her. And while they were unaware of this, Cressida was plotting to use this power of hers to finally end the Avengers for good, taking them down from the inside by absorbing their powers instead of empowering them. Captain America was the one who confronted Avenger X, and with her plot to divide the Avengers folded, Cressida disclosed the true extent of her abilities by siphoning the Avengers' life force and utilizing their combined powers to quickly defeat them.
Number 7. Fantastic Four. When Spider-Man was just starting out, the Fantastic Four were among those to betray him. I know, shocking. Spider-Man went to them looking for help supporting his Aunt May and himself. You see, back in those days, and kind of in general with Spider-Man and his comics, money was tight, and Spider-Man was trying to find a way that he could use his talents and his abilities to help pay the bills. He was hoping to join the FF, who he assumed must have a salary wage as superheroes that would be reasonable in amount due to them, you know, saving the world all the time. Unfortunately, that was not the case. He broke into the Baxter Building in an attempt to impress the family of amazing superheroes, only to find out that they were a non-profit organization and they didn't really get paid to do what they did. And even if they had space on the team and could afford to pay Spidey, they claimed initially they wouldn't really want him. Ouch. Spider-Man at the time was considered an outlaw by the press and police, and they didn't want to be affiliated with him even. Harsh. Of course, that's all water under the bridge now, and Spider-Man has actually been a member of the FF's Future Foundation and is actually on the extended or backup roster for the Fantastic Four team. So it all worked out in the end, but in the early days, it was a pretty harsh betrayal. Number 6. Morbius. Morbius and Spider-Man have had a complicated history. Sometimes they're allies, sometimes they're foes. Morbius himself also has had a complex history. Sometimes he's a hero, sometimes a villain, sometimes he's a little more somewhere in between those two. Case in point, when he resurfaced after seemingly being cured of his vampirism by a bolt of lightning. I kid you not, that is what happened in the comics. This stuck for quite a while, but eventually Morbius's hunger and his thirst for human blood returned. He attempted to reach out to a doctor at Empire State University for help, but instead ran into Spider-Man, who didn't trust him. It turned out that he was in earnest trying to figure out what was going on and fix it, but the doctor he wanted help from turned out to be an ally of Hydra. She kidnapped Morbius, and when Spider-Man came to free him, things quickly went kind of crazy. Instead of teaming up with Spider-Man and showing gratitude for this rescue, Morbius attacked his captors, and then when Spider-Man intervened in that attack, attacked him instead, draining him of blood and inadvertently turning Spider-Man into a vampire-like creature himself for a while, who was known as Hunger. Also, I know there's gonna be people that are gonna be like, Amanda, Morbius does not want blood. He just wants plasma, Amanda. It's just all about the plasma. Look, the plasma's from the cartoon, okay guys? And they had to say plasma because they couldn't say blood because it's a kid's show. So fun fact. Although plasma is important as well. You can donate plasma and you can donate blood. There's lots of cool things you can donate. You should check that out and go save someone's life today. This just became a PSA from Amanda McKnight. Can you tell that I donate blood? I feel like you can. Number 5. Spider-Man. Although typically this hero is often known by the name Scarlet Spider. That is right, we are talking about the hero and Spider-Man clone, Ben Reilly. Currently in the comics, Ben is the Spider-Man, or a Spider-Man, currently roaming New York City. He is the Spider-Man of choice by Corporation Beyond, who is looking to get into the business of superheroes, apparently. They acquired the right to the Spider-Man name, and as such, Ben actually asks, or kind of more tells Peter, that he can't be Spider-Man anymore. Or at least he can't use that name. He does ask for his blessing as well out of respect. He's not trying to be a jerk here, but it's obvious that Peter is hurt by this revelation, as he already seems to be suffering from a bit of like an identity crisis perhaps, which is also pretty interesting because I feel like so is Ben at this point. Number 4. Wolverine. Oh boy, Wolverine and Spider-Man aren't always two heroes who see eye to eye, and we've seen them butt heads a few times, despite both being heroes and even at times teammates. I would say one of the things that has come up the most when it comes to Wolverine potentially betraying Peter has to do with one of his biggest love interests in the comics. Yep, we are talking about Mary Jane Watson. In the Ultimate Comics, the two heroes body swapped, and Wolverine in Peter's body attempted to put some major moves on Mary Jane, and in the main continuity, Wolverine once insulted their relationship, causing Peter to throw him through the window of a building. A seemingly impenetrable, bulletproof window too. Just FYI. That is how upset Peter was about the remark. Number 3. Black Cat. Black Cat is another hero who has betrayed Peter in the past. And to those of you focusing on her more criminal and villainous past, yes, Felicia Hardy is not a saint, but I would argue that now, currently in the comics, she is more a hero than a villain. Also, she recently just like worked with Captain America, and I feel like if you're doing that, you gotta be pretty good, right? Captain America doesn't really work with villains usually. I think at least we can give her an anti-hero status. She betrayed Spider years ago, but has also betrayed him more than once when she ended up going behind his back to get herself some superpowers. She did this because she knew Spider-Man was worried for her safety, and she wanted to be able to keep up with him and help him, you know, to not worry about her. Unfortunately, she turned to Kingpin to get said powers, and they ended up being bad luck probability-based powers, so she really only ended up hurting Spider-Man a lot in the end. Especially when he kind of realized that something was up with her and that she was keeping secrets. Not a good look. Not a good look, Felicia. Number 2. Spider-Man. What is worse than having your lover betray you? How about you betraying yourself? Yes, I know we've already talked about Spider-Man on this list, but now we are here to talk about the other Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man, in comparison to his clones at least, Peter Parker. Peter might do everything he can to save the world and make New York a safer place, but at the end of the day, there is one enemy he really can't defeat. Himself. After all, Spider-Man is probably one of the most guilt-ridden superheroes of all time, always feeling like he is responsible for the death of those that he loves. He doesn't just feel as though he's betrayed himself and those he cares about as a hero, but he also therefore betrays and often sabotages his own happiness because of this, believing sometimes that he doesn't actually even deserve to be happy. It's pretty tragic stuff. Also, it's not always your fault, Peter. Sometimes bad things just happen, you know? Like, you can't control everything in life, you just gotta accept it. Peter needs more therapy, that's what I think. Number 1. Iron Man. Iron Man is probably one of the characters most well known for betraying Spider-Man on this list, even though what he did to actually betray him is somewhat debatable in terms of it being considered, you know, like a one-for-one betrayal. Iron Man encouraged Peter to join him and support the Superhero Registration Act. Spider-Man happened to be such a big fan and friend of Tony's that he agreed to do so and even unmasked for Tony Stark during a televised public statement. However, later on, this would come back to bite Peter in the butt when he and his family ended up being targeted by criminals who wanted Spider-Man dead. Surprise, surprise. Aunt May ended up in the hospital as a result of a targeted attack, and eventually this whole debacle would also lead to Spider-Man losing his marriage to Mary Jane when the pair made a deal with Mephisto in order to save Aunt May's life. There is even a what if focused around what would happen if Mary Jane was the one to be killed, where Peter specifically blames Iron Man for basically everything bad that has happened to him up till this point. Well, not everything, but everything surrounding this. Also, he realized what was going to go on with Iron Man wanting to use like the negative zone kind of as like a prison, kind of that, and then he was like, I'm really not about this. And then even then, they chased Spider-Man down. Although I believe Iron Man was kind of like, guys, let's just talk to Spider-Man, let's not be weird about this. But at that point it was too late. Iron Man really had no control and it had gotten out of hand. That's what had happened. Civil War I, baby.
Number 10, Hawkeye. In the MCU's Avengers in 2012, Hawkeye betrayed the Avengers by being brainwashed by Loki. Loki knew that having Hawkeye with him was valuable, and he could access many of the secrets that S.H.I.E.L.D. was hiding. Hawkeye launched an attack on the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier that the Avengers so happened to be on so he could free Loki. He takes out one of the propeller systems on the helicarrier and invades it with his team. Hawkeye and Black Widow fight, with her hoping to free him from the spell. In the end, he's able to fight the spell because Black Widow hit him really hard in the head and was able to gain back control of his own mind. Number 9, Hank Pym. In the Avengers issue 213, Hank Pym received a court-martial for how he handled a situation in a fight with the Avengers. He definitely was not in a good place at the time and was a complete wreck. He still wanted to be a part of the Avengers team and wasn't ready to be forced off of it. He decided to design a robot that would attack him during the trial. The catch was that since he designed it, he knew how to easily defeat it. His wife, the Wasp, was completely against Hank doing this, but he didn't care. He told her to keep it a secret, and in the end, the Avengers did find out about the truth about Hank's plan and took him off the team. Number 8, Moondragon. In the comics, Moondragon has very strong mind control abilities, like telepathy and telekinesis. So when she stumbles upon a planet with the people of that planet ready for war, she wants to help them. She doesn't want these people to suffer over what will eventually happen if the war is to start, death. So she decides to control the entire race of people on this planet with her mind control powers to stop fighting. But she didn't just stop there. She went even further and made sure that the people of this planet would even worship her. She even wants to continue to do this throughout the universe. The Avengers find out, she brainwashes Thor to fight them, and she's later defeated and gets a device from Odin that dampens her powers to stop her from doing this ever again.
Number 7, Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde didn't intend to betray Wolverine. It wasn't really her choice at all. She was brainwashed into doing it by Wolverine's longtime rival and old teacher, Ogun. Ogun was looking to get revenge on Wolverine, and so psychically uploaded a bunch of awesome ninja and martial arts skills to Kitty Pryde's mind, and then sent her to assassinate her mentor, friend, and fellow X-Men, Wolverine. Fortunately, the bond between Logan and Kate was so strong that they were able to work together to defeat Ogun in the end, freeing Kitty but leaving her with an experience which had changed her forever. She returned to X-Men a little more mature and definitely more of a badass. I think she still has all of that like assassin knowledge in her brain as well, taking up the new name for herself for a time at least of Shadowcat. Yeah, it was really more Ogun than Kitty betraying, but even if she was being controlled, it was still her own physical form fighting against Wolverine. And this is a cool story that I just enjoy revisiting, so I saw an opportunity to put it on this list and I was like, I'm gonna do it. So I hope you enjoyed it. Number 6, Mariko. Mariko Yoshida was one of the major loves of Wolverine's life. The two were even engaged to be married, but Mariko, being the good person that she was, wanted to make sure that her family no longer had any criminal ties before the wedding happened, as she was now the head of Clan Yoshida. Unfortunately, before they could get married, Mariko died during her attempt to broker peace between the rival criminal gangs. She ended up going to hell and would later meet Wolverine there when he was sent to hell by the Right Red Hand. Or at least, his soul was sent there. His physical form was still on Earth, but it's a whole story. While his soul was there, his suffering would manifest in him being tormented by Mariko, his former love. She didn't want to torment Wolverine, but she pretty much had no choice. Despite this, Wolverine, when he escaped, came back and tried to free her, but Mariko believed she deserved what she got and chose to stay in hell, refusing to let him save her. I think she felt pretty bad because she was like, I feel like I betrayed you, and also I got stuff to atone for, you know? Number 5, Scarlet Witch. As much as I hate to include someone like Wanda on this list, it kinda has to be mentioned that she technically betrayed all of mutant kind with decimation and M-Day. Of course, I will still argue that this really only happened because Wanda's mental health was often shafted in her past, and so her kinda snapping after House of M made a whole lot of sense. While Wolverine was still Wolverine, there were a lot of mutants, and I mean a lot, that were affected. The whole community felt this blow, and Wolverine was part of that community, so even though he still had his powers, he was still hurting a lot, I think. I think a lot of mutants were. Also, he was one of the first people to realize what had happened in the House of M reality, and he was not too happy to have a fabricated life made for him and be denied the reality and history that were true to him, no matter how bleak or painful in comparison to the world Wanda had made for him and everyone in an effort to try to make herself, her family, and pretty much all other supers happy. I love how Wanda's like, I just want to give everyone a reality where like we can all be happy, you know? And everyone's like, how dare you? How dare you try to make me happy? Obviously, I feel very bad for Wanda, I think you can tell. Number 4, Professor X. Oh bub. Professor X for being the head of the Xavier Institute and for being a leader among his own X-Men team who claims to stand for mutant and human harmony and preaches about what it means to be good and be a hero and fight for all of humanity united, has a lot, and I mean a lot, of skeletons in his closet. He has betrayed the X-Men multiple times, Wolverine included. I think mainly this has to do with Professor X choosing to suppress as opposed to acknowledge and deal with his darker side. He put his team in danger when it was revealed that Danger Room was actually sentient and itself a living AI mutant who then pursued the team in an effort to get to Xavier. And also technically came equipped with knowledge on all their weaknesses, by the way. Danger Room is scary. Or just Danger, sorry. Just Danger, that's what the mutant version of Danger Room is called. Additionally, Xavier's repressed negative emotions and his severe punishment of Magneto was what led to the creation of the psychic entity known as Onslaught, which was sort of a blend between those two psyches. You could also argue that even in modern comics, Wolverine has felt betrayed by Professor X. When X chose to allow all mutant villains to come to Krakoa and call it their home, Wolverine was one of the few people to protest, thinking it was a bad idea that would inevitably backfire. I guess we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Although I feel like based on Inferno, Wolverine may have been right here. Number 3, Hulk. The Hulk has always been a rival of Wolverine's, despite the fact that both of them are heroes. In fact, Wolverine made his first appearance in Incredible Hulk issue 180, where he fought against him. Hulk has dropped in to fight Wolverine a few times in the comics, and sometimes does so just to prove that I guess he's the strongest between them. Although it doesn't always end that way. In fact, quite a few times their fights have actually ended more in a tie than anything. Some of Hulk's other personas, like Joe Fixit, have also gotten involved with Wolverine, and even when Fixit has meant well, there is an animosity between these two that generally leads to Fixit causing more trouble for Logan during their adventures. This is usually because they each have their own approach to dealing with problems and with baddies. Although, I guess, to be fair, it seems that the Hulk usually also feels betrayed, which is what leads to their fighting. But even the slightest thing can set him off, so these betrayals are usually just from some like small remark that Wolverine has made. So in the end, I always feel like Wolverine is more betrayed by the Hulk because he's just like said something offhand, and then the Hulk's like, now we have to fight. It's like, whoa. Breathe, it's okay. Number 2, Magneto. Sure, Magneto was a villain when this one happened, but he also joined up with the X-Men only to turn on them later, and vice versa. It's happened a lot. Magneto might, in general, be thought of as a villain because of his iconic classic appearances in the Fox X-Men films, as well as the X-Men 90s animated series and in the classic comics, but he's really more complex than just being a villain. In fact, currently in the comics, he's more of a hero, I'd say. However, that doesn't change his history with Wolverine, who is understandably a little less likely to trust former villains turned heroes because of history like this. Magneto is the one responsible for ripping the adamantium right out of Wolverine's skeleton back in the day, which was insanely painful and left Wolverine in a more feral state for a good long period in the comics. He also lost his nose because of this, and this all went down after Magneto had been acting more heroically in the comics, working with the X-Men on behalf of Charles Xavier in his absence. In fact, Magneto was like the leader of the X-Men then, so if you want to be like, but he's a villain, he was definitely a hero and then he went back to being a villain. He felt like other people were betraying him. The tension between the two characters has remained ever since and even shows up in the current X books, despite them both residing in harmony on Krakoa. Magneto only ranks a little lower here because he is so iconically a villain in many folks' minds still, but to me, he's a hero. Number 1. Cyclops. Cyclops has betrayed Wolverine multiple times in the comics. Probably one of the biggest betrayals happened either when the two couldn't agree and so created their own X-Men teams separate from one another, each believing their view on young mutants and how to train and teach them was superior, or when Cyclops recruited Wolverine's female clone / genetic daughter onto the Black Ops mutant team X-Force against his wishes. Laura, aka X-23, aka now Wolverine, had just recently escaped those who saw her only as a weapon and a tool to be used, a deadly killing machine, which was exactly why Wolverine did not want her on the X-Force team. But Cyclops saw how useful she could be and felt that if she was willing to join, then it didn't really matter what Logan thought. Wolverine evidently disagreed with his outlook. He disagreed quite strongly. Number 10. Spider-Woman. This betrayal is a little more subtle, but it definitely led to some trouble for both characters down the line, so I think it's an important one to mention still. Jessica Drew was in Madripoor with her friend Lindsay and Patch, aka Wolverine. She knew he was Wolverine, and he knew she knew at this point, I believe, but he still went by the alias of Patch because Logan thought he was being oh so sneaky, and he didn't want the world to know that the X-Men were actually alive at the time, even though I feel like anyone that met Patch probably knew it was Wolverine. Jessica had decided to take up a job as the Prince of Madripoor, Prince Baran's bodyguard, but Patch thought it was a bad idea because Baran was a bad guy. At the same time, Jessica was giving Patch grief for working his muscle and getting involved with Tiger, a powerful crime boss in Madripoor. Both felt the other was betraying their own sense of morals and thereby betraying their friendship, so it was kind of a two-way betrayal in these characters' eyes. In the end, Patch was right to criticize Prince Baran as Jessica ended up near death after stumbling upon the Lazarus Project during her shift in the palace and barely escaping with her life. Patch likewise would have a trial ahead as he wrestled with the mysterious Lazarus Project, but he'd forgive Jessica when he found her and help her to get to safety and get much needed medical attention. She was pretty messed up. Don't you hate when that happens? Don't you hate when you stumble upon mysterious projects and then you just get like thrown into a sewer because you're like in such a terrible condition? I know I do. Number 9. Gambit. In this case, Gambit wasn't entirely in control of himself. He was under the influence of the Shadow King, who had possessed him and made him fight against Logan. Wolverine happened to be the one to face off with him. He managed to get the drop on Gambit, defeating him in battle when Wolverine successfully pinned him down. This all happened too after Wolverine had been cut off from the rest of those X-Men who were not influenced by Shadow King, but as Wolverine said while Gambit was busy throwing insults his way, he is one of the best when it comes to winning fights. And regardless of being cut off from support, that is exactly what happened here. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear about more superheroes who have been betrayed, oh no, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Wolverine. Laura Kinney, formerly known as X-23, and Logan have quite the complex past. Laura is basically a genetic female counterpart to Wolverine. Some consider her a clone, and some consider her more a genetic offspring, kind of like Logan's daughter. In reality, she's kind of both, to be honest. When Logan first came across Laura, he realized that she had been brainwashed and wasn't in control of her actions. Able to sympathize, he did his best to free her. She was supposed to go straight to the X-Men basically, but decided to venture out on her own instead, which resulted in her getting in a fight again with Logan next time that he ran into her. However, he was able to not only defeat Laura this time, but also basically talk her down and bring her back with him to the Xavier Institute, helping her to find a home among the X-Men. And now the two are very close, and I don't think Laura would even consider fighting Logan again unless she had like absolutely no other choice, like if he turned evil or some such thing. But then honestly, she wouldn't be betraying him really because the Logan she knew would probably like want her to take him out. I feel like he's also the type of guy that's kind of like, you know, I've lived a long life, like I'm kind of fine, but I guess I gotta keep living, bub.
Number 7. Vision. Now if you know Vision, then you know that he's not usually one to betray his team unless there is a quote-unquote perfectly logical reason for it. There was the time after he linked up with a super community from Titan and he thought the only way he could protect her was for him to run it himself. At first he only wanted some additional power and he helped Hawkeye establish the West Coast Avengers, to expand the Avengers' influence, and even met with the leader of the free world about making the leader of the Avengers a cabinet position. When his schemes didn't give him the control he wanted in Avengers number 253, he took over nearly every computer on the planet, starting with the machines that controlled the world's weapons, and he went, let's just say, a little bit crazy with power. Interestingly enough though, that wasn't the only time Vision betrayed the Avengers, as there was a time that his actions cost the Avengers the trust of the federal government. Vision's difficulties with balancing his emotions got the best of him after he became the leader of the team. In trying to create world peace, Vision tried to control the world's computers and defense systems. He was opposed by the Avengers, who had to launch an attack on their own headquarters just to defeat him. Vision eventually realized his mistake and tried to atone for his crime, but unfortunately the damage was already done. Number 6. Quicksilver. Pietro Maximoff started off his costume career as Quicksilver on the wrong side of the law, working with his sister Wanda on Magneto's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Eventually deciding to reform, Pietro and Wanda would join the first new lineup of the Avengers alongside another former criminal, Hawkeye, under the leadership of Captain America. Quicksilver blamed the Avengers for his strained relationship on his sister and his wife, and he gave government information to get back at them. In 1986, the East and West Coast Avengers were playing baseball when they received a surprise visit from the Freedom Force, a group of X-Men villains released from prison to work for the government. Mystique, leader of the Freedom Force, announced to the Avengers that they were to be arrested for treason. And after a fierce battle with the Freedom Force, Captain America agreed to surrender. At a hearing, the Avengers were told that someone had obtained proof that Vision's attempt to gain control of the world's computers was actually a plot engineered by the Avengers themselves. And the Avengers demanded to know who their accuser was, and after much suspense, the traitor was revealed to be none other than Quicksilver. Number 5. Sandman. To his merit, Sandman did actually make an attempt to reform. He received a full pardon for all his misdeeds, and even served as a reserve member of the Avengers for a time. During his run as a hero, he was actually able to make friends with his former enemy Spider-Man, but sadly good things don't last forever, not even in comic books. In 1999, Sandman turned his back on his fellow heroes and joined up with his old partners from the Frightful Four, Wizard, and Trapster. It wasn't entirely his fault since the Wizard used his ID machine to bring out the evil side of Sandman once again, but still. Sandman used the trust he had gained with Spider-Man to his advantage, allowing him a chance to take him by surprise. In returning to his villainous ways, Sandman not only betrayed Spider-Man, but the Avengers as well, causing his membership to be revoked. Number 4. Swordsman. The Swordsman was Hawkeye's mentor and a criminal who tried to join the Avengers just so that he could take advantage of the benefits. When they turned him away, he was approached by Iron Man's arch-enemy, the Mandarin, who gave him a new sword and a special mission: to infiltrate the Avengers and destroy them from the inside. Mandarin engineered a plot to trick the Avengers into thinking that Iron Man had vouched for the Swordsman. The ploy actually worked, and Swordsman was allowed entry, but not without gaining the suspicion of his new teammates. And honestly, rightly so, because Swordsman planted a bomb in Avengers Mansion, just as he was told to, but began to have second thoughts because of the feelings he developed for Scarlet Witch. When he tried to remove the bomb, he was caught by Captain America and forced into a fight. Despite the Swordsman's betrayal, years later he was actually forgiven and welcomed back onto the team alongside his wife Mantis. Honestly, I really think the Avengers are just a little bit too trusting sometimes. Number 3. Dr. Druid. While most would consider Dr. Druid to be a pretty obscure member of the Avengers, he's actually spent enough time with the team to make his eventual betrayal memorable. Dr. Druid is a sorcerer who practices Celtic magic that he picked up from the Ancient One. His magical abilities are overshadowed by another one of the Ancient One's peoples, Doctor Strange, of course. I know it seems like he is just a minor character, but trust me, he is not. Dr. Druid was still a fairly new addition to the Avengers when he had the sudden impulse to become its leader. He started out by undermining the current leader, Captain Marvel, aka Monica Rambeau. He questioned every move she made and constantly stated that the Avengers needed a much stronger leader. And when Captain Marvel had to temporarily step down for medical reasons, Dr. Druid used his mental powers to manipulate the Avengers into electing him as the leader in Avengers number 294. And in this time, he also forced She-Hulk to fight her fellow Avengers, which ultimately led to her quitting the team. As it turned out, though, Druid himself had been under the control of Kang's wife Ravonna, who used him to gain control of the rest of the Avengers, and after Druid was defeated and lost in the time stream, the Avengers actually disbanded for a while. Number 2. Wonder Man. The ionic energy-powered superhero Wonder Man has a long history with the Avengers that goes all the way back to his debut in Avengers number 9 in 1964, the same issue in which he also died. Wonder Man was resurrected years later and has become a staple in the Avengers ever since, either serving on the main Avengers team or in the West Coast branch. When Simon Williams first joined the Avengers, his life actually depended on betraying them, and here I'll explain why. Wonder Man acquired his powers from Baron Zemo and the Masters of Evil. Zemo used an experimental ionic ray to give him his powers, but the effects would end him if he didn't receive a weekly antidote. In order to get that antidote, Wonder Man had to infiltrate the Avengers' ranks and deliver them to the Masters of Evil. Wonder Man led his new team into an ambush, but changed his mind when the fighting started. He helped the Avengers defeat the Masters of Evil even though it meant giving up the antidote. Without Zamel's antidote, Wonder Man seemingly perished, but would eventually return and rejoin the Avengers. Another instance of betrayal by Wonder Man took place in the 2000s when he started being much more aggressive and hateful towards his former teammates. He believed that the Avengers were a disease that was destroying the world instead of making it better. The tension between Wonder Man and the Avengers came head to head when he gathered a team called the Revengers, a small group of heroes and villains with bitter feelings towards the Avengers. Wonder Man led his team in an all-out assault against the Avengers. When Wonder Man was defeated though, it was determined that his ionic energy was actually having an effect on his brain. And when he was finally cured, Wonder Man just apologized for all the trouble he caused, but he still was a traitor nonetheless. And number 1, the Protector. Novar is a Kree soldier who sided with Earth during the Secret Invasion. After taking the name Captain Marvel, the same name used by the Kree hero Mar-Vell, he joined Osborn's Avengers. After leaving the team, he became a member of the official Avengers team as the Protector. He served them very well for a time, and until Avengers vs. X-Men, which saw the world threatened by the coming of the Phoenix Force. The Avengers needed all hands on deck, meaning it was a bad time for one of their own to turn into a traitor. He betrayed the Avengers during the events of Avengers vs. X-Men, although he didn't actually side with the X-Men. If the Protector had his way, he would have helped the Avengers stop the Phoenix Force and continued to serve on their team. But as a Kree warrior, Novar felt compelled to comply with the Supreme Intelligence, who ordered him to steal the Phoenix Force sample from the Avengers and deliver it to the Kree Empire. Novar obeyed, even though the sample was a critical piece of the Avengers' plan to stop the Phoenix Force. When the Protector learned the Kree wouldn't honor their responsibility to protect Earth, he stole the sample back and wanted to rejoin the Avengers. The Avengers, however, wanted absolutely nothing to do with him, and honestly, I can't blame them. Number 10, Maxwell Lord Infinite Crisis. In the pages of Countdown to Infinite Crisis, the Blue Beetle is left near bankruptcy after funds from his company were mysteriously stolen. His investigation into his missing fortune yields something much darker though, a conspiracy to wipe out the superhuman community orchestrated by the Justice League International's former manager, Maxwell Lord. Now, he had enjoyed his influence over the Justice League and the formation of the Justice League International in the wake of Crisis on Infinite Earths. He was a wealthy and powerful businessman and claimed to have learned nobility and compassion from his late father, Maxwell Lord III. All of this pointed to him as a very genuine figure out to help keep Earth safe, but I guess we were wrong. During the Invasion saga, Lord acquires the superpower of mind control and things only get worse from there. The build up to Infinite Crisis saw many shocking events occur in the DC universe, including Lord's brutal murder of Ted Kord, aka Blue Beetle II. Lord's betrayal continued to damage the League throughout Infinite Crisis, with Lord stealing Batman's metahuman satellite to hunt down every superhuman on Earth with an army of cyborgs at his disposal. Wonder Woman straight up just murders him though after he mind controls Superman into assaulting his fellow Leaguers. As a last laugh after death, footage of Wonder Woman snapping his neck leaks worldwide, causing her to be alienated from the rest of the League. Number 9. Flash Out of Time and End of the Road. In a possible future, this iteration of the Flash is a much darker Barry Allen with 20 years in the future. This future Flash first appears in the Flash Annual Volume 4 Number 3 as a broken man. Reeling from the death of a close friend and fellow speedster Wally West, future Flash travels backwards through time on a crusade to murder all of the former enemies he deems responsible for West's death, hoping to somehow change the future. His actions only widen a tear in the Speed Force, however, and the once hero ultimately decides to use a present-day Barry Allen's energy to seal the rift. Proving his superiority in a one-on-one battle against the present-day Barry, the pair are soon interrupted by the arrival of Wally West himself. Able to take on both speedsters at once, Future Flash's actions caused the one thing he began his quest to stop, the death of Wally West. Barry killed numerous rogues along the way before learning the error of his ways with help from his past girlfriend Patty Spivot, and eventually gave his life to save the present-day Barry Allens. Number 8. Gambit Mutant Massacre. Deciding if Gambit deserves a spot on this list today was a bit tough because although he is a member of the X-Men, he's a notorious thief with a reputation for stealing the most impossible of objects, not to mention all of, the other terrible stuff that he's done. Amanda, however, was able to convince me that he is still technically a hero, and that's why he's showing up here today. Although he wasn't technically a member of the team quite yet, I'm still counting his actions that led to the Mutant Massacre event as a betrayal towards the X-Men. Gambit aided the evil Mr. Sinister in his plans in exchange for having a piece of his brain removed to allow him to have better control over his powers. Gambit formed the Marauders, a group of superpowered mercenaries, and led them to the Morlock tunnels, resulting in the event Mutant Massacre. Gambit's sins were finally aired out though in the early 2000s, and all of it seems to be somewhat forgiven, but that being said, I still feel it's worth remembering that Gambit's first canonical act was betraying the X-Men.
Number 7. Sentry. Sentry is one of, if not the most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe. He was recruited by Steve Rogers to be a part of the new Avengers. Unfortunately, Sentry is not fully good. It does in fact have a little dark side of his personality called the Void. In a sense, the Void is the total opposite of Sentry, and regardless of all the good Sentry accomplishes, the Void can quickly undo that with his chaos. Norman Osborn basically manipulated and used Sentry for his own agenda and got him to join the Dark Avengers, where he helped destroy Asgard and kill Loki as the Void. Thor was quite unhappy about this and ended up killing Sentry, but no one stays dead long in the comics and he was later brought back to life. Number 6. Scarlet Witch. In Avengers Disassembled, Scarlet Witch goes crazy, all due to the fact that she really just wanted to have children who were real. But since she was with someone who was artificial, that wasn't really possible. But that didn't stop her from creating them. She used her powers to create the children that she always wanted to have. But what drove her mad was the fact that the children weren't technically real, and she couldn't stop thinking about that. She then basically uses her powers to tear the Avengers apart by making their lives complete hell, basically killing Hawkeye, Tony costing the Avengers a deal with the UN because he was drunk while speaking, and Vision getting split in half by She-Hulk. Number 5. Iron Man. Yes, there was even a point during the comics where Tony betrayed the Avengers. Well, sort of, anyways. During the crossing, Tony's brain gets corrupted by Kang the Conqueror. He was trying to control him by making him go crazy. Kang even gets him to frame Hawkeye. Once the Avengers find out, they go back in time to find a younger Tony to help them stop the older Tony. Now, this story was a bit confusing, with some even believing that Tony wasn't as mind-controlled as we all believed he was, since in the end, he didn't even seem surprised by anything he found out that he did while working for Kang. Number 4. Namor. During the Avengers vs. X-Men series, Namor left the Avengers and went on the side of the X-Men. Now, to be clear, the X-Men were only trying to apprehend the Avengers, but Namor planned something much more evil. And by evil, I mean he found out that the Avengers were in Wakanda and thought that was the perfect plan to take them out would be to drown them with a huge-ass wave. It didn't end up working for Namor, and instead only enraged the Wakandans wanting revenge for what he did. From there, Namor and Wakanda became rivals. This rivalry is something that fans have wanted to see be a part of the MCU since the introduction of Wakanda in Black Panther in 2018. Number 3. Hulk. In the comics, at one point, Hulk came to the conclusion that the Avengers disliked him, and that really irritated the Hulk, which is something that you really don't want to do, especially to the Hulk. He ends up leaving the team and trying to work with Namor to get revenge on them. Apparently, even though Hulk and Namor were working together, they weren't going to stay loyal for long after their plan was complete. In the end, and before the battle was complete, Hulk turned into Bruce Banner and took off and disappeared. Number 2. Black Widow. So in the comics, Black Widow has turned on the Avengers at one point. Now, in her defense, she was being blackmailed by Weeping Lion with the goal to go rogue and turn on S.H.I.E.L.D. During this time, she allowed herself to be brought back to the Avengers Tower by Tony Stark. She only let him take her back there to gain access to his equipment. So she knocked him out and took what she needed. Also, during the MCU's Civil War, she also turned on Tony Stark and ended up jumping ship and siding with Captain America. Number 1. Captain America. This was a huge shocker at one point in the comic and was a jaw-dropping moment when fans were reading it. The reveal that Captain America was really a Hydra agent all along sent shockwaves through the fan base. How could the Star-Spangled Man be evil? He has always proven to do anything he had to protect his family, team, and his country. It turns out that the Cosmic Cube had altered Steve Rogers' history in a major way, making him this Hydra agent and betraying everything he stood for. It led Rogers to take over America with Zemo, all in the name of Hydra. Desperate to stop this, Ant-Man and the Winter Soldier went into the Pocket Dimension to find Steve Rogers' consciousness. They were able to use the Cobra to save Steve Rogers' true form. Evil Steve Rogers fought good Steve Rogers in the end, and good prevailed, and evil Steve Rogers was defeated by good Steve Rogers wielding Mjolnir in an epic battle.
Bruce Wayne, Batman Beyond. How can Bruce Wayne betray himself? Well, unless we're speaking in a philosophical or psychological way, he can't. That's why this point is talking about Batman Beyond, which is Terry McGinnis. In Batman Beyond, issues 31, 32, and 33, after visiting Arkham Asylum, Bruce Wayne begins to act rather strangely. He begins drinking at odd times, he doesn't seem to care when Terry is on the verge of death, with Terry's brother having to step in to save him, and he seems to go gambling and brags about his money a lot too, which is kinda strange. Most shocking of all though, he shoots at Terry when he's confronted and tackles him off a ledge. It turns out, it isn't actually Bruce Wayne. It's actually a doppelganger villain named Falseface, so it's all good. and I'm sure none of you are surprised. Jezebel Jet. In the Batman R.I.P. comic, the group known as the Black Glove started working in Gotham, and Bruce Wayne immediately smelt foul play. At a point during this conflict, his love interest at the time, Jezebel Jet, was revealed to be a double agent. Jezebel and the Black Glove even buried Batman alive. But Batman is one guy whose heart you don't want to mess with. He rises from the grave, revealing he was merely pretending to be in love with her too. Then he reveals her whole backstory, which he seemed to already know. She then left, vowing to get revenge on Bats, which seems a little backwards to me, before being killed by Talia al Ghul. The Crimson Knight. Richard Lyons was a character that appeared in Detective Comics number 271. He was also known by the name Crimson Knight, and was a vigilante in Gotham, gaining the trust of the GCPD as well as the heroic duo of Batman and Robin. Being the good guys though, they had a sneaking suspicion he may not have been on the up and up, and after confronting him after he tried to steal some valuables, it was revealed that he was actually Crime Lord Lyons. And he was promptly captured, and his career as both a hero and a villain were both ended.
Number 7. Cyclops Avengers vs. X-Men. First of all, I have to get this out of the way. Man, do I love talking about the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. The Phoenix Force is heading towards Earth, and the Avengers, obviously fearing the almighty entity, made Iron Man and Giant Man prepare a disruptor weapon to kill the Phoenix Force. Instead of killing it though, the blast alters the entity and divides it into 5 fragments that forcefully bond with 5 X-Men. Namor, Magic, Colossus, Emma Frost, and of course, their leader Cyclops. While the heroes tried to use this awesome power gallantly and responsibly, they ended up leaving quite a bit of damage behind them. Possessed by the Phoenix, Cyclops killed Professor Xavier and led many attacks against humans and mutants alike. Afterwards, he did adopt a more of a revolutionary attitude, leading a rebellious team of X-Men and coming into conflict with other superheroes and his former friend Wolverine on more than one occasion. Because of all this, Cyclops was briefly viewed as a martyr, believed to have been killed by Black Bolt in Death of X before it was revealed he had just succumbed to Mpox just days before. Number 6. Aquaman, Throne of Atlantis. Aquaman has always been a bit torn, being a hero from 2 worlds and all. While he was Atlantean royalty, his primary concern is always the fate of his world's oceans. However, he still has this sense of responsibility towards the surface world of his father, and this really came to play in the Throne of Atlantis storyline. Aquaman finds himself at a crossroads with his brother's determination to start a war between Atlantis and the surface after malfunctioning Navy missiles hit Atlantis. He realizes, much to the surprise of his teammates, that the Atlanteans were utilizing a strategy he had devised in case the 2 powers ever went to war. Despite his close relationship with his fellow heroes, he refused to stand with the Justice League against the Atlanteans and ultimately staged a brutal offense against the Justice League in the battles that followed, forsaking his old team for his homeland. To add even more insult to injury, the League eventually discovered that Aquaman's longtime pal Nuidas Vulko was behind the whole thing. He orchestrated for Atlantis to be bombed specifically to incite a war. Now, what was the end goal, you might ask? It was for the League to defeat Ocean Master, which would then lead to the reinstatement of Arthur as their king. Number 5. Wolverine Old Man Logan. Now, if there's one member of the X-Men that you can truly trust, it's definitely Wolverine. He is surprisingly loyal and dictated by a code of honor. Still though, that doesn't stop a betrayal or two from happening every now and then, though it wasn't necessarily his own fault. In the Wolverine Old Man Logan storyline, we get to see the vicious side of Wolverine that we've all come to know and love. However, like I said, it wasn't really his fault. So basically it's the future and Logan is an old man, and he hasn't used the Wolverine persona or his claws since this mysterious night in the past when the villains supposedly attacked. We learned through some flashbacks that a massive group of 40 supervillains attacked the X-Men mansion, and during this attack, Wolverine gets in touch with his primal side and grows crazy and just kills every single one of them. After the fight and the intense slaughter, things change and Wolverine realizes that this was all just an illusion. The entire time Wolverine had his vision and mind altered by Mysterio, and all the villains that he killed in combat were actually his fellow X-Men. This destroyed Logan, and he decided to retire his Wolverine mantle for good after that, essentially killing that part of him so he would never do something like that again. It's definitely a sad way to end a run as a hero, but I can see why he felt that was necessary, and as much as I hate to say it, this was a huge betrayal and definitely a shocking one at that. Number 4. Green Lantern Emerald Twilight. In 1994, DC decided that it was finally time for Hal Jordan to step down from the Green Lantern mantle so that it could be passed on to someone else. So how did DC decide to end the career of one of their most beloved heroes? Well, they couldn't just do it Quietly, of course, they had to turn him into a villain of some sorts, undoing pretty much all of the good he's ever done. In the Reign of Superman storyline, which took place after the Death of Superman storyline, Hal's home of Coast City was completely destroyed by the villains Mongol and Cyborg Superman. As a result, the city was demolished and its 7 million citizens were killed. This turn of events made Hal completely lose it, and he believed that if he could steal all of the main power battery's energy, the source of the Green Lantern ring's power, he could permanently rebuild Coast City. To do so, he killed all of the remaining Green Lantern Corps and the villain Sinestro, which unfortunately led him to becoming the villain Parallax, who even to this day looms over Hal. Hal did eventually redeem himself by sacrificing his life to restart the sun during the Final Night storyline, and also by revealing that his madness had just been caused by him being possessed by that fear entity. Hal would later go on to reform the Green Lantern Corps thanks to the expert guidance of Jeff Johns. Now, all things considered, this is a huge betrayal and a bit of a tough one to overlook, making it remain a black spot on DC's legacy. Check out this insane storyline for yourself in 1994's Green Lantern Volume 3, number 48 to number 50. Number 3. Terra, the Judas Contract. Now, if I'm being honest, there is probably no betrayal more famous than that of Terra Markov's. Debuting in New Teen Titans number 26, Terra Markov was a young, precocious girl who joined the team. It was learned later that Terra infiltrated the team at the behest of Deathstroke, dismantling the team from the inside. Throughout the 4-part storyline, Terra gives Terminator all of the information he needs in order to take down the Titans one by one, and he does so starting with Corey and Donna Troy, slowly making his way through all of them until he got to Dick Grayson, who was able to elude him. Realizing that he can never truly retire from superheroing, Dick adopts a new costume and identity and calls himself Nightwing, while Joey is also ready to follow him into battle as Jericho. Adeline then gives the heroes the location of the Hive Command Center, and Nightwing and Jericho go to the Hive base nestled in the Rocky Mountains, sneaking into the facility and discovering that the Teen Titans have been strapped to a giant machine which is slowly siphoning away all of their life energy. Nightwing and Jericho fight through a horde of Hive shock troops, but are eventually captured. Using the Terminator's body and weaponry, Jericho frees the other Titans and begins fighting the Hive, and Terra is enraged at Terminator and feels that his affection of Joey makes him look weak. She completely loses control of her sanity and yearns for nothing more than the death of everyone in the room. Changeling refuses to believe that Terra has gone bad and is certain that the Terminator has just brainwashed her. Terra's powers rage out of control until she finally causes a mountain of earth and debris to collapse down from the ceiling, unfortunately killing her in the process. Number 2. Batman Tower of Babel. Easily one of the most trusted but not the most trusting heroes around, it should really come as no surprise that Batman had secret files outlining the ways to take down his teammates just in case, right? Well, apparently it was pretty shocking for the other members of the Justice League during the Tower of Babel storyline. It's an insane level of preparation, like Batman prepared for some truly brutal plans, including blinding Green Lantern and turning Superman's skin invisible so that he'd go insane from yellow sun overexposure. It was revealed in JLA Tower of Babel that these files were stolen by Ra's al Ghul and used to orchestrate a debilitatingly effective attack on the individual members of the JLA. When Batman comes clean with how the villain was able to pinpoint their various weaknesses, half of his teammates vote for him to be booted out of the group. However, he ends up leaving on his own accord, but his friendship with the other members was deeply damaged, and even to this day it remains a bit of a problem. Even in the New 52 universe, such plans still existed and Batman came clean about it, but thankfully this time Superman was able to convince the League not to hold it against him. Number 1. Captain America Secret Empire. I feel like we all knew this one was coming, like, come on, this was definitely the most shocking betrayal in recent comic history. After the Red Skull messed with and manipulated Kobik, a sentient cosmic cube, Steve Rogers revealed himself to be a Hydra defector, but more specifically, he was a Hydra sleeper agent who happened to be a twisted version of Cap that secretly took his place. Allying himself with a new Madam Hydra, Rogers took advantage of a global catastrophe to seize control of the world's government. Once in power, Hydra just made its move. S.H.I.E.L.D., infiltrated by Hydra thoroughly, began assuming control of key locations and executing any who stand in its way. I'll let you all check out this storyline for yourself because it is a great one, but I will tell you that our good Cap comes out on top in the end, defeating his evil doppelganger in a head-to-head battle. A few weeks later, and after a ton of hard work, the United States was thankfully turned back to normal.
At number 10, we have Baphomet. Although he was actually just onomatopoeia in disguise, it was still a moment of betrayal that took Batman by surprise. Baphomet appeared to be a young, up-and-coming vigilante superhero who appeared numerous times to help Batman, one time helping him defeat the Black Spider. He showed face so many times, in fact, that Batman started to trust him and eventually gave him his blessing to start fighting crime in Gotham. Batman even had Baphomet fill in for him while he was on vacation in Aspen with his fiancée. And Onomatopoeia as Baphomet was really playing the long game. He even caught Mr. Freeze and single-handedly stopped the Joker. So Batman really started to confide in him, even bringing him to the Batcave one day after a real heart-to-heart moment. In this instance, Batman even goes as far as taking off his own mask in front of Baphomet, who promptly reveals his true identity as Onomatopoeia and slits Silver St. Cloud's throat, who is Batman's fiancée. Of course, at this point, Batman knows that he messed up big time, but how could he have known? This dude played the long game, with a sad outcome for Batman, of course. At number 9, we have Zatanna. This is another pretty sad one, but then again, that's sort of the theme of this whole list, right? Zatanna, a powerful superhero who has control over magic, is a longtime love interest for Batman. And in one storyline known as the Mind Wipe storyline, Zatanna is caught wiping Dr. Light's memory, and also trying to change his personality to be less evil. But when Batman walks in on this happening, she also wipes part of his mind as well. Of course, Batman doesn't realize this since his memory had just been wiped, but the Justice League has to come together and confess to Batman what had happened. This crushes Bruce, causing him to naturally develop some pretty serious trust issues and create Brother Eye, an intelligent system that orbits Earth to keep an eye on superheroes that may betray him in the future, which leads to more sad discoveries down the road for the Dark Knight. Okay, at number 8 we have Catwoman. I know, she definitely isn't considered a villain to Batman either. In most cases, as we all know, Batman is usually romantically associated with Catwoman. And going into the Nolan-verse, there's an instance in The Dark Knight Rises when Batman's trust for Catwoman is strong enough that she actually leads him into a trap set by Bane, in one of the closest calls we see Batman ever face, comics or movies, to facing death. This just proves that Catwoman really can't be trusted no matter how influential or appealing she is to Batman. She will always put herself first, and that's something we can basically confirm after seeing this. Luckily, at the end of this event, when Catwoman sees how hard Bane beats up Batman, she gains sympathy, leading to a change of heart. But it was sort of too late at that point.
The Cavalier. The Cavalier was a swashbuckling, sword-wielding hero who first appeared in Legends of the Dark Knight number 32. Batman was a big fan of the Cavalier, actually. He had such a positive outlook when fighting crime, and he was a man of gallantry and honor, and he reminded Bruce Wayne of his childhood, being very similar to Zorro, who Bruce Wayne was a fan of. Sadly, the Cavalier let Batman down when he started resorting to a life of crime when he realized just how much easier it was compared to fighting crime. So he's not so honorable after all, it seems. The Justice League. There are actually multiple storylines involved here. Basically, in the Tower of Babel story, it's revealed that Batman has contingencies for every member of the Justice League in case anything were to go sour. When Ra's al Ghul gets his hands on these plans though, he uses them against the Justice League. Now, Batman is able to defeat Ra's, but it causes the entire Justice League to lose a bit of trust in Batman. I just want to pause to say, this is kind of dumb. He's Batman. You think he wouldn't have a plan for scenarios like that? But hey, conflict sells. Either way, after the Joker ends up hitting the core members of the Justice League with Joker Toxin in the Endgame storyline, they all turn on Batman, leading to a completely awesome moment where he takes them all on and comes out on top. Yeah, they were not in their right minds, but their actions were slightly fueled by the distrust caused by the event of the Tower of Babel. Catwoman, Dark Knight Rises. Now, if you haven't seen Dark Knight Rises yet, well then you clearly wouldn't care if I spoil a tiny little plot point. Batman makes a deal with Selina Kyle to give her a program called the Clean Slate that will eliminate her criminal past in exchange for her leading him to Bane. To be fair, she does lead Batman to the villain, only it's a trap and Bane beats the ever-living heck out of Bruce, breaking his back. She did it to save her own skin, but I just feel like if she put a little bit more faith in Bruce, maybe the movie would have ended way earlier. But I like how the rest of the story goes, so a betrayal that ultimately wasn't so bad, right? Hey guys, before we carry on, I just want to quickly shout out the top 10 nerd presence on Facebook. Check us out there, and also, if you are enjoying the video, smack that like and subscribe button, it really helps us out. Thanks for all the support guys, it means a lot. Flashpoint Batman. When the Flashpoint universe was created, it changed a lot of characters. Possibly one of the most interesting ones though, was Batman, who in this universe is actually Thomas Wayne, with Bruce being killed instead, and Martha Wayne becoming the Joker. It's twisted and cool, and this Batman has a different moral code. killing criminals. When he finds out that mainline Bruce Wayne becomes the Batman, he deems this unacceptable and tries to change his son's ways. Instead of being, I don't know, a good father though, he teams up with Bane to break Bruce. Things get out of hand in the City of Bane event, which actually ended up with Thomas killing Alfred Pennyworth, which broke everyone. He very clearly regretted his actions, but I don't know, man, you ain't coming back from that one. Not for me, sorry, you're done. Superman Dark Knights of Steel. I heavily regret not talking about this when we covered the top 10 new DC universes. Dark Knights of Steel takes place in a medieval fantasy version of the DC universe. It's super cool. The Wayne family used to rule over the land until Jor-El lands on Earth after escaping Krypton, and they easily take over. Bruce and Kal-El are actually unknowing brothers, with Bruce being Jor-El's half-son. After a whole bunch of stuff happens that I won't tell you because you should read it, Bruce reveals the truth of his parentage to Kal, who stabs him in the chest with a shard of kryptonite. He then flies him up into the sky and throws him into the ground. Now, we don't know yet how the story is going to go from here on, or I don't know, but it definitely surprised me and I wanted you to all know so we can all follow along together. Ghostmaker. The Ghostmaker and Batman actually go back a long time, having met when they were both training to become vigilantes. They were easily friends. But the difference between the two lay deeply in their core values and motivations. The motivation of Bruce's parents' death didn't sit well with Ghostmaker, and actually caused them to fall out. The Ghostmaker saw crime fighting as an art rather than a duty, and he lacked a sense of empathy that brought Bruce to classify him as a psychopath. They fought multiple different times and ultimately agreed that the Ghostmaker will stay far out of Gotham. That is, until Joker War, when he invaded Gotham, incapacitating Batman and the Bat family plus some other heroes, and he tries to save Gotham. Yeah, that makes sense. DC versus vampires. Alright, this one is hot off the presses. This year we got the DC versus vampires storyline that I didn't even know about it until making this video. Basically, the vampires are building themselves up to take on the world, turning many superheroes and supervillains into vampires. There's a mystery, however, surrounding who exactly the hero leader of the vampires could be. After testing all the members of the Bat family, it's determined that none of them are vampires, so at least he has that. After some intense detective work and a whole lot of other stuff that I don't want to spoil, the leader of the vampire army is finally revealed. Spoiler warning, okay? If you want to read this, turn off the video now. Okay? It's frickin' Nightwing! Revealed as he plunges his fist straight through an unaware Batman's chest nonetheless. What? He had been consuming the blood of Starfire, which has the unique ability to make vampires immune to their natural weaknesses. I'm gonna be staying tuned on how the story progresses, but Vampire Nightwing? Oh yes. Oh yes, 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 yes.
Number 10, Iron Man 2099. One of the Iron Man 2099s anyways. This one comes from the 2099 future of the Iron Man Armored Adventure series. Here 2099 Iron Man is a hero named Andros Stark, who is also Tony Stark's grandson, but becomes an antagonist in the series. All because he travels back in time to defeat his grandfather, Tony Stark. However, this is because Andros believes Tony is to blame for creating the AI menace known as Vortex in his time. He attempts to kill Tony and the Avengers, but later realizes when they aim to use a virus to defeat him that this nanotech virus is actually Vortex, and that Vortex therefore only existed in true timey-wimey paradoxical fashion because it was created to defeat him, Iron Man 2099. In other words, Andros and his attempt to stop Vortex was also the cause of Vortex's existence. Man, what a time travel story. I feel like time travel and Tony Stark go together just like bread and butter. This is just always a thing that happens. Number 9, Iron Lad. Iron Lad probably didn't mean to betray Iron Man back when he was known as Iron Lad, but the reality is he was destined to do so. This is because Iron Lad goes on to become the famous Avengers villain Kang the Conqueror, along the way also becoming Immortus and using his power to, at that time, manipulate and influence Iron Man, to get him to do his bidding, to help him direct events in a certain way. Kang/Immortus are generally all about manipulating the timeline so that they can achieve their own goals in the future. They're like, I'm gonna set everything in motion, then I'm gonna go to the future, and then like everything will be great for me Kang, or for me Immortus. And unfortunately, Immortus's machinations this time around caused Iron Man to be pulled into his plot, and eventually turned into Immortus's own sleeper agent, making Iron Man turn on his friends and then become a villain. Boo. And like I said, Kang and Immortus are technically Iron Lads, so technically a hero, at least to start with. And friends, before I move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more betrayal lists, be sure to let us know who you want to hear about getting betrayed next. So many people have been betrayed, so many people. Number 8, Hulk. I personally kind of think Hulk was actually kind of justified in this one, but you could consider it betrayal just based on the fact that Tony was, pretty much just trying to apologize and atone for his past, and Hulk wanted, well, pretty much wanted none of it. This spun out of Original Sin when it was revealed that an inebriated Tony, back when he was an alcoholic, was responsible for an accident in essence that transformed Bruce Banner and created Hulk. He had tampered with the Gamma Bomb and had also pushed for more deadly weaponry against Bruce's wishes. However, the version of Tony that we had in the present day had been mentally reset, so despite being post-Superior Iron Man here, he was back to being a good guy and basically just felt awful about this whole thing and about all of the bad stuff he'd done in the past. But despite this, Hulk still wanted to end his life and was unwilling to talk it out, which, isn't really fair considering that Tony was like, look, I know I messed up, but can we just be friends? Aw, poor Tony. Everyone always wants to kill him. It's a rough go.
At number 7, we've got Alfred. Not a superhero in the state we all know him as, but why he belongs on this list is that in one storyline, he's actually given superpowers. And if his intentions had remained heroic, Alfred would have been a superhero by nature. But on Earth 1, while Batman is away, Alfred decides to track down a criminal organization that Batman had been monitoring. But he's captured, and when Batman and Robin come to save him, he sacrifices himself by walking into a trap set by the bad guys before they could. On the brink of death, Alfred is revived by a physicist named Brandon Crawford, who uses a radiation treatment to revive him. Unfortunately, this instead turns him into the Outsider, giving him superpowers and leading him into an angry rage towards Batman. Thanks a lot, Brandon. You had one job. Anyway, when the Outsider targets Batman's allies, Man-Bat, Batgirl, and Robin, they get the best of him, tearing the evil Outsider out of Alfred's body and leaving him vulnerable. And Alfred, in all his heroic glory, lays the last blow, taking out the Outsider for good. It's nice to have you back, Alfred, but maybe just stay put in the Batcave from now on. Number 6, we have Stephanie Brown. When Stephanie is Batman's Robin, she betrays him as well. Sort of. It was an accident, but a betrayal nonetheless. When Batman seemingly dismisses her abilities to be an adequate Robin, she sort of pushes him to train her, which he finally does. But when she disobeys him twice in combat, Batman is forced to retire her because he feels he just can't trust her. Feeling isolated, she goes off on her own to try and prove her worth. She gets a hold of one of his long-term plans to deal with the criminal underworld of Gotham. But due to her missing one key detail which the plan was predicated on, it all spins out of control and causes a citywide gang war, resulting in the Batman War Games storyline. She is then captured by Black Mask and tortured for information about Batman. She escapes, but later succumbs to her injuries in the hospital with Batman by her bedside. A very sad end to a potential superhero who just wanted to be accepted, but instead betrayed the very man she was trying to impress. At number 5, there's Jason Todd. Jason, who used to work alongside Batman as Robin, turns on him and teams up with the Riddler and Hush, another character who betrays Batman. We'll talk about that later. What happens is that Batman thinks Jason was killed by the Joker, and after a while of accepting this as fact, Batman is completely caught off guard by the return of his old partner, but this time with ill intentions for Bruce Wayne. So it turns out he actually is killed by the Joker, but after Superman Prime alters reality, Jason is revived. Sort of. He falls into a coma for a year and is taken by Talia al Ghul to a Lazarus pit to restore his powers. But when he reemerges, he isn't himself and is influenced by Talia to confront Batman, wondering how the Joker hadn't been killed to avenge his death. When Batman doesn't show remorse that he spared the Joker's life, Jason is enraged and takes on the mantle of Red Hood. He then does some nasty stuff like leading multiple criminal gangs in Gotham, sharing Batman's identity with Hush and the Riddler, and other villainous things which would be detrimental to Batman's ability to keep the streets of Gotham adequately protected. At number 4, we have Azrael, or John Paul Valley, in the Batman Nightfall story arc. A staunch supporter of Bruce Wayne, John Paul Valley is placed in charge of the Batman alias as Bruce Wayne is facing burnout due to run-ins with Bane. But while Azrael is wearing the mask and cape, he actually starts to inflict too much violence on the criminals of Gotham, going against the reputation that Bruce had taken so long to develop. Azrael even goes as far as distancing himself from Robin, believing that Robin isn't enforcing enough violence on the criminals of Gotham, seeing this as the only way to restore peace. Commissioner Gordon's trust towards Batman also takes a hit from John Paul's instability, because of course, no one is informed that this new Batman isn't in fact Bruce Wayne. It's another devastating betrayal of Bruce Wayne's trust, because when Bruce needed him most, a close confidant not only betrays his wishes and his reputation, but also gets carried away with his influence over Gotham, at one point leaving a captured civilian to die, along with serial killer Abattoir, who had been the captor. Just a flat out betrayal all across the board. Okay, at number 3 we have Thomas Elliot, otherwise known as Hush. Thomas was a childhood friend of Bruce Wayne who had the ability to become a superhero, but instead went supervillain, taking a stance against Batman in everything he does. What happens is that Thomas Elliot turns bad and decides to try and kill his parents for their fortunes. But Thomas Wayne, Bruce's father, actually keeps his mother alive due to his advanced surgical skills, which angers Thomas, who turns on Bruce in a bitter turn to resentment. He starts referring to himself as Hush, a masked villain covered in bandages, set out to defeat Batman. And he gets pretty close too, teaming up with the Riddler, the Joker, Poison Ivy, and Killer Croc in an elaborate plan to take down Bruce Wayne altogether. So yes, I know what you're thinking. He's not really a superhero, but deserves a spot high on this list because he could have been. This guy had dealt with a tougher upbringing than Bruce, his dad being an abusive alcoholic and his mother never protecting him adequately, so he had a harder time following the path of good that Bruce had led. But when they would play together as kids, Thomas would often outmaneuver Bruce, proving that had he pushed through his trauma and gone down a path of good like Bruce, he could have been a superhero that might have even contended with Batman's abilities. And I just had to put him on the list of times Batman was betrayed, because what hurts more than a longtime friend betraying you know what I mean? Actually, I hope you don't know what I mean. Let's keep it at that. At number 2, we take a look at the Injustice storyline when Superman betrays his otherwise longtime friend Bruce Wayne, along with some other superheroes as well. In a storyline explored both in the comics and in the video games, Superman is tricked into killing a pregnant Lois Lane under the influence of drugs that the Joker gives him. As a result, Superman goes against his core values and kills the Joker. This throws him into a spiral, as he also turns on other members of the Justice League who he once called teammates, including Batman. When Batman notices that Superman's reign of terror has turned into an authoritarian regime, he sets out to stop him. So what does the once heroic Superman do? He reveals Batman's true identity to the world and recruits Bruce's own son Damian to fight against him and the Justice League alongside him. Ouch. This brings us to number 1, Damian Wayne, Bruce Wayne's own son. This is a sad and a brutal betrayal, which is why it belongs at number 1 for me. Having been brought up by his mother Talia al Ghul and trained as an assassin from a young age, Damian is an aggressive and unagreeable young man who doesn't like to follow rules, especially those set by his father, who he feels is too easy on the criminals and isn't allowing him to thrive as the trained assassin that he is. Sound familiar? So when the opportunity arises, Damian Wayne joins up with Superman, who, as we've just previously explored, had just adopted all those values that Damian desired. So in a selfish and naive move to serve his own needs to kill, Damian Wayne, the former Robin, betrays his own father and helps to take on the entire Justice League as a force of evil. Just like many supervillains, his motivations are pretty deep-seated, and it's pretty obvious that he'd always wanted to serve alongside his father, but this just proves that just like Hush, a powerful being's upbringing can make a huge impact on the brutal path they choose. I'm sure if Bruce Wayne had known that he had a son in the first place, and it hadn't been sprung on him by Talia so late into Damian's adolescence, the boy could have been saved from these dark ways, which led to his betrayal. Brutal.
Number 10, Captain America. Or a version of Captain America, at least. This version of Captain America betrayed a whole bunch of superheroes and pretty much all of the civilians of the United States of America. That's right, we're talking about Hydra Cap, who technically now is an alternate, but at the time of reveal was sold as being a longtime sleeper agent of Hydra in the main continuity, changing pretty much everything we thought we knew about that character character's origin. In reality, Captain America was simply altered by the Cosmic Cube, and the real version of him from the main continuity still existed within the cube, or shards of the cube itself. He was technically changed by a version of the Cosmic Cube that was a person who was named Kobik, but anyways. Peter himself actually also lost his company, Parker Industries, as a result of Hydra Cap's takeover. To keep his various offices around the globe from falling into Hydra's hands, Peter had to basically run them all into the ground, essentially destroying everything he had built. If that isn't a betrayal, I don't know what is. And it's Captain America! Shocking. But not really, because it's Hydra Cap. Like I said, alternate reality. Whatever. Number 9. Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is another hero who kinda accidentally, I suppose, betrayed Spider-Man. Well, in the comics, Strange recently saw Peter as his champion in a fight between Strange and Mephisto. In the MCU, Strange tried to help Peter out with the fact that he and his friends all seemingly got rejected from the colleges they'd applied to because of his identity being revealed to the world. Doctor Strange decided to use a spell that would make the world forget that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, even though it was also against the new Sorcerer Supreme, Wong's, wishes and his recommendations. Now, granted, Steven did mean to help Peter here, he wasn't like intentionally betraying him, but in the end everything went kinda haywire, mainly due to Peter, who kept trying to change the parameters of the spell as Strange was mid-casting it. But this isn't really how Strange betrayed Peter anyways. It was more afterward, when other villains from across the multiverse ended up appearing in the current reality, and Spider-Man wanted to try to help them as opposed to just banishing them after finding out they were all pretty much fated to die, which Strange had kind of seemingly known about but just didn't really care about. Strange had told Peter to round them up, but withheld that important information about their fate, which to me was a pretty major betrayal. Like, these are people from the Spider-Verse, I feel like you should at least tell Peter what he's doing and what kind of fate he's condemning these people to if he sends them back. And of course, this revelation only led to another betrayal in kind when Peter decided to release these villains, helping them escape Strange in an effort to actually fix them. What can I say? You betray someone and then they're probably gonna betray you back. That's how it goes. Number 8. Boomerang. Okay, so Boomerang isn't really a hero. He's more of a villain than anything, but for a moment there he was leaning in the direction of being a hero at least, and I think because of that we can give him a spot on this list. Boomerang is known for being a member of the Sinister Syndicate and ended up getting roped into Sinister War. Before he was battling it out with all the other Sinister teams though, he was actually almost Peter and Spider-Man's ally and friend at one point. In fact, I would say he was Peter and Spider-Man's ally and friend, and roommate. Okay, so in reality, Boomerang was just using him to get help collecting pieces of a tablet that he wanted, but that's where the betrayal part comes in. When Fred Myers applied to be Peter Parker's roommate due to Myers' reputation, Parker really wasn't feeling it. He wasn't so sure. But he did decide ultimately to give Myers a chance after he kinda helped him out and kinda saved his life. And when he did, he was happily surprised. The two became friends, and Boomerang even showed promise as Spider-Man's ally and a potential hero in his own right. In the end, however, once the tablet was acquired, Boomerang revealed his true colors, and admitted that this was kind of his plan the whole time. But he also admitted he did feel bad for betraying Spider-Man in a letter that he left him. Myers actually felt so bad he ended up helping Spider-Man out at one point during Sinister War, helping him to hide from the others for a time. Aw, so cute. Also, I just really like this story, so I was like, I could talk about this on this list. And I got excited, and here we are. Number 7. Ant-Man. Hank Pym has done a few things to portray a good amount of the Avengers, but this time around, we're actually talking about a version of him that merged with Ultron. I think it's called Ultron Pym is what we usually call this version of Ultron, fun fact. I'm calling it Ant-Man though because it's a heroes list, but Ultron Pym I think is the general name. Hank and Ultron had united to become one being, which ended up messing them both up, as you'd imagine, in Ultron Agenda. Tony at the time was dating Janet Van Dyne, and Ultron Hank, or Ultron Pym, did not like this. His plan was to fix the world by turning everyone on it into a sort of organic and AI merged being, and wanted Janet to basically merge with Jocasta and act as his partner and in essence part organic, part AI, Robo-esque bride. Because Tony was with her, this pretty much infuriated him, and so the two faced off, with Ultron Hank trying to kill Tony because of his relationship with the Wasp. What a weird story. So many weird stories. Number 6, Eric Killmonger. Eric Killmonger isn't really so much a hero in the main continuity, and in the end, he didn't end up being so much a hero in this reality either, but he did pose as one for a good amount of time and was a member of the Guardians of the Universe. Although he did try to betray them as well, having his own objectives. So, important to note. Killmonger became Iron Man's right-hand man in the Disney Plus streaming series What If, in the episode titled What If Killmonger Rescued Tony Stark? What would have happened? Well, Killmonger would have pretended to be a friend to Tony Stark only to later betray him and kill him in cold blood. 1, because he pretty much hated everything that Tony represented, but 2, because Tony's death was kind of all part of a plot to try and provoke a war between the US and Wakanda so that he himself could defect to the side of Wakanda and thereby take over the nation from within, using Stark's technology to win Wakanda's favor when he helps them to defeat the US. It's a pretty bad betrayal though. It's pretty tragic. Like, I was like, man, wow, that's crazy. That whole episode was crazy. I hope we get to see more of it. Number 5, Iron Man 2020. Iron Man 2020 is Arno Stark's Iron Man. In the comics he just went by Iron Man, but editorial wise he was referred to as Iron Man 2020, just to make it more clear that, you know, this isn't Tony Stark Iron Man, and also because that was actually the name of the series that he was a part of. Arno Stark, by the way, is Tony's brother and was the natural born son of Maria and Howard Stark, whereas it was revealed that Tony himself was adopted. Arno was hidden away for his own protection and also was not able to roam freely in the world due to him being born requiring medical assistance to breathe. In the end, Tony would learn the truth of his being adopted and about the existence of his brother. The two would team up for a time, but when Arno took up the mantle of Iron Man and combated against an AI rebellion, in the end he believed the best way to protect humanity was to control all the AI and the humans with his submission code. But when he asked his brother Tony to join him, Tony saw that Arno pretty much needed to be stopped, as he'd become a danger to the world and its free will. I just feel bad for Arno, man. Can we bring Arno back yet? Is Arno doing anything right now? I don't think Arno is doing anything. I feel like he's still in his bubble. And I think he's like going to die soon, which is why we're keeping him in a bubble. Number 4, Captain America. Captain America had his reasons, and honestly, I was on his side of the war. But the amazing thing about Civil War I was that the two sides each had their own seemingly justifiable motivations for their actions. So although I was on Cap's side, I could understand how fans on Tony's side would see Cap as a traitor of Iron Man instead of the other way around. Iron Man was fighting on the side of the Superhuman Registration Act, believing that making superhumans register so they could be monitored and deployed, working within government oversight for the safety of civilians, was the better way to go. Captain America was against the SRA, which put these two at odds, and which Iron Man and fans of Iron Man would likely consider to be a betrayal, considering that Tony thought he knew the better way to protect people. In the end, I would say it turned out that Cap was right, but you know, we each have our own sides of that argument that we believe in. Number 3, Iron Man. That's right, Iron Man betrayed Iron Man. Are you surprised? It's already happened twice on this list. It's gonna happen again. In fact, that happens kind of multiple times in the comics and in narratives. It is kind of a thing that I feel like comes up more than once. This time though, we are focusing on The Crossing, when Immortus turned Iron Man into a sleeper agent and villain, which we talked about a little bit earlier on the list. A young Iron Man was then brought to the present day to fight against his older version, and you could say there was some betrayal on both sides here. Older OG Iron Man had betrayed his younger self and his own ideals by allowing himself to become a pawn of Immortus, though admittedly it wasn't really his fault, and younger Iron Man fought against older evil Iron Man, which was likely considered a betrayal in his eyes, because you know, he's got his younger self fighting him. He's like, that's not cool, man. At least until older Iron Man almost killed his younger self, and then he ended up being redeemed in the end, sacrificing himself inevitably to save everyone else, and allowing the younger Tony to remain in the present day and take over for his older self. Oh, The Crossing. What a weird time you were. Even more odd, later down the line, these two Iron Men would actually be merged together, becoming the real Iron Man instead of two different versions of the character. And now we have Reset Iron Man, there's like stuff that he doesn't even remember from the past Iron Man's had a weird continuity. Number 2, Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel and Iron Man used to be super close, but then Civil War II happened. They are over the events of Civil War II now in present day, but boy did this initially muck up their friendship. After the success of Civil War I, Marvel thought a second Civil War was in order, but this time the motives behind it, they weren't quite as solid. Carol Danvers believed that the inhuman Ulysses' visions of the future that might come to pass, and were somewhat unclear, should be acted on to protect humanity. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, but okay. In other words, Civil War II was Minority Report. Iron Man, being down this road before, tried to talk Carol out of this madness, but after Rhodey died when a prediction of Ulysses's came true, there was basically no stopping her. Kind of odd as well, as though Carol and Rhodey are often a couple in the comics, and I do ship them together, Iron Man is definitely one of those that is closest to Rhodey, and even with Rhodey's death, Iron Man still thought that Ulysses' visions shouldn't be held in such high regard. So you'd really think that Carol might have, being more open to listening to him. Carol fought against Iron Man and a line was drawn. A very weird line that didn't really make a ton of sense, but hey, Civil War II everyone. It is what it is. It happened. Now we have to live with it. Number 1, Black Widow. Black Widow majorly betrayed Iron Man in the Ultimate Universe, and sure, it's not main continuity, but it's honestly, it's so bad, it needs to be acknowledged and mentioned, and that's why it took my top spot. In the Ultimate Universe, Black Widow was only posing as a hero, but was really, in secret, a villain the whole time, simply pretending to defect to get in with the heroes and then betray them and betray the United States. She was engaged to be married to Tony Stark and ended up breaking off the engagement when she revealed her true colors. She attempted to steal Tony's fortune and tragically killed his loyal butler and his friend Jarvis as well. So sad. In the end, Tony was able to stop Black Widow because he had given her a suit of armor as an engagement gift, but made sure to still have control of the nanites that were in her blood because of his terrible track record with women. Too bad he wasn't able to save Jarvis though, it's pretty sad. Black Widow would get hers in the end, but Tony would feel the pain of this betrayal for quite a while thereafter.